teens. Alan, of course, is here with us now via telephone on America's Forum. Let's continue the conversation. Alan, before the break, you said you didn't think that any lawsuits would meet with success. But let's revisit this case of Casey Hickox, the nurse who came back from West Africa, saying that she felt as if her rights were being trampled and she was made to feel like a criminal upon going into quarantine upon her return. Her lawyer said the case raised, quote, serious constitutional and civil liberties issues. What do you say about that attorney's assertion?
Well, they may raise issues, but they're not going to be successful in my view. I think the courts are going to defer to elected public officials so long as they rely on reasonable medical conclusions. And the courts are going to say, again, it's better to err on the side of safety than on the side of liberty when it comes to this kind of short-term confinement. What's the big deal out of holding somebody for a couple of days? I have recently learned that my grandmother, when she came to the United States in 1905, was held in confinement in Ellis Island for 2 days because they had to check out her financial and medical situation. You know, in the long term, when we live in a society where we're all dependent on each other and there are communicable diseases, we have to make sacrifices. Now, if we're talking about 6 months or 2 months or even a month, or we're talking about being put in the kinds of institutions that people used to be put in when they had tuberculosis, that would be one thing. But we're no longer living in that kind of society. And my suggestion to folks who come in from abroad is understand that you pose something of a risk, that you can't find out instantaneously whether you have a communicable illness. So you have to allow yourself to be treated medically and isolated for a relatively brief period of time. We have to strike the appropriate balance. The lawsuit is not necessarily the best way to do that.
Alan, you've said more publicly here on Newsmax TV as a private citizen than has the government's so-called Ebola czar, Ron Klain. Where is he in all of this? What should he be doing?
He's studying. I mean, Ron is a terrific guy, a former student at Harvard Law School. I know him. He's a brilliant man. But, you know, he has a lot of catching up to do, and he has to balance the political, the federal, the state, liberty versus medical issues. He has a lot of learning curve to catch up on, so I suspect we'll hear from him soon.
Alan, Anthony Banbury, the head of the UN Ebola Emergency Response Mission, spoke to Australian TV yesterday describing how important these doctors and nurses are to controlling Ebola. Let's take a listen.
We need them, and we need them fast. And when foreign medical workers do come and work on the front lines and put their own lives at risk to save the people of this region, but also protect the people back home, those foreign medical workers, when they return, should be treated like heroes and not subjected to stigmatization or unfair treatment.
Hey, Alan, when the Apollo 11 astronauts came back, they were heroes, but they were in quarantine coming back from the moon. What is the deal with Anthony Banbury trying to make these healthcare workers into victims, for crying out loud?
Right. There's no inconsistency between treating somebody as a hero and quarantining them. We can do both at the same time. They have to be given the best possible circumstances, perhaps compensated for their time lost. But in the end, we have to resolve doubts in favor of the public health, not the private rights of citizens, in situations like this, as long as it's reasonable and as long as it's not used politically and as long as it's not overdone. But I don't see any inconsistency between treating people as heroes, which they are, and saying to them that you have to subject yourself to medical testing. So what happened to that doctor who went on the subway and bowled and met with his girlfriend doesn't happen again. That was too risky.
Alan, 30 seconds left. The CDC has revised its Ebola guidelines yet again. Do you feel like that organization has a handle on this crisis?
I hope so. Look, it's tragedy what happened to people of Africa, but for America, Ebola is the best thing that could have happened to them. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. It makes sure that we're prepared for the next airborne and really dangerous plague. This one turns out not to be so dangerous. It's a practice run for us, not to the people of Africa who are suffering grievously, but for us, it will make us better prepared.
Let's hope it is a practice run. He is the author of the ebook Tunnels, the case for Israel's just war against Hamas. He is noted attorney Alan Dershowitz. Alan, thanks as always for your time and joining us here on America's Forum.
Thank you.
You heard what Alan had to say. Quarantines? Absolutely. Elected officials should call for them. What's your take on that? Tweet me your comments at NewsMaxTV, #America's Forum.